So how I explain, and either way, you can think of it either way in that, the market and the product should reinforce each other. So you want to make sure that you are initially targeting the needs of your market, and then iterating on that to make sure that you have a product that's going to sell and that's going to continue to sell as the market evolves. So kind of the first portion of it is, if you already kind of, and this is assuming you already kind of have an idea or a technology, the first portion of that is still kind of thinking about the market for a while. And some of that means a couple of things. So the first thing is market segmentation. And pardon my handwriting. So we're talking about market segmentation. And what that means is you're brainstorming potential markets that might be a good fit for your technology. So, in my case, maybe I'm interested in nursing homes, or I'm interested in co-working spaces, or I'm interested in large offices at biotech firms. And the list would be way longer than this, but you would basically list out all the different things that you might be interested in that might be a good fit for your idea. And then what you want to do is you want to talk to those customers as much as you can. So, and my personal recommendation is at least 10 per segment you might be interested in. And you're trying to listen, understand their needs, understand what kind of willingness to pay they may have, and see also how they work. Who are the decision makers within their organization? To understand if you could really access those people to be able to get your business off the ground. So that's kind of the first piece of it. Once you've thought about that, you want to figure out, you want to decide which segment you're going to target, and that becomes your beachhead. So that's called your beachhead market, and that's going to be your focus. You're going to continue to understand that market and really understand the profile of that kind of customer. And so, when you choose, that's your beachhead. I think it has two H's. So that's your beachhead market, and you want to understand it. And then, and as an important component of this, is your total addressable market, or your TAM. So you need to be able to calculate the annual revenue you could get from this market if you captured 100%. So with 100% market share, so you would say, let's say, maybe you have some kind of a big industrial product, so you know that you could get a customer to pay $1 million, and you think there are 10 customers in the market. That would mean your TAM is 10 million. In terms of what Bill Allett's book, 24 Steps, talks about, that's too small. Your TAM, you want it to be kind of between 20 million and 100 million. Not too big, not too small. So once you've kind of done that, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because I know we're talking about product market fit here. If you've decided the market's the right size and you want to pursue it, then an important piece that you need to keep in mind is you want to go ahead and produce, and again, there are some steps in between here, but we're just skipping ahead. Just imagine there's more steps there, but this is developing your minimum viable product, MVP. So with your minimum viable product, you want to just include, like it sounds, the minimum, enough to get your product into the hands of your potential customers and start getting feedback. This creates a really important feedback loop. So, as you talk to your customers, you learn changes to make to your product, and then you continue getting those products back to your customers. And that's an iterative process that helps you really refine your product so that it resonates with your market and so that you can really get people to buy what you're selling. So that's kind of the central, in a very quick quick way is kind of how you start to establish product market fit. And again, this is an iterative process. It can take a while, but it's crucial. And if you nail product market fit, you're going to be well on your way to building a good business. So my name is Molly Bales. I just graduated from MIT Sloan in June. Currently working on essentially my own startup, a U.S. entity that is part of an Indian corporation. And so I've kind of been a part of energy and entrepreneurship for a decently long time. Definitely focused on energy while I was an MBA for the full-time program for 2 years. Prior to that, I was working for a clean tech startup called Harvest Power that does organics recycling with focus on anaerobic digestion. And prior to that, I was a Harvard undergrad and had a history of science. Okay. Yeah, so I think for me, there are a number of things I really like about entrepreneurship. I think that there's nothing more exciting than getting to bring an idea to its realization. And so that's something that always really excited me, of saying, okay, I see there's a problem and I can solve it. And not only can I just solve it, but I can make a business out of it in a way that I can actually spread that solution to many people. I think that the other aspect of it that's nice is that it allows for a lot of creativity, a lot of autonomy, just a lot of independent thinking. And so from that perspective, I find it extremely stimulating. Yeah, so I would say, I think there is definitely a link there between wanting to solve a problem and kind of wanting to turn it into a business. Some people want to solve problems in different ways. There are certainly plenty of other jobs where people are doing a lot of problem solving, or people who are on a more traditional academic route may want to kind of solve problems through their research and not actually commercialize technology they're developing or things like that. But I do think once you've made that decision to shift from I want to solve a problem to I want to solve a problem through business, then you kind of have to be systematic about it. And that's, I think, where, and what we've talked about is that that's where disciplined entrepreneurship really comes in. Sure. And kind of the approach that we've discussed that's in Bill Let's book, of trying to figure out how you can build a business in a very intentional way that allows you to either fail fast or really narrow in on what you're going to focus on, so that if you think you've identified a problem, it's important to keep teasing out through getting to know the market, kind of all sorts of technical feasibility, and actually determining what you're ultimately going to do. So the first thing that really comes to mind for me is the urge to want to build before you've achieved product market fit. Okay. I think that can be a real issue, which is that I've worked with some PhDs, and I did while I was at Sloan, and in some cases, people are just intellectually stimulated by solving a problem. But it's not enough to solve a problem if you want to build a business. You have to solve a problem that people will pay to have solved. Right. So that's an important aspect of it. You can't just build something and assume people will pay for it. I think the other aspect of it that's really important is, and kind of follows from that, is that you have to learn the market. And that means you really have to pound the pavement. You have to talk to a lot of people. And there are lots of different rules about how many customers to talk to and all this kind of stuff. But most importantly, it's really about stepping outside of the lab or wherever you're working, and talk to as many people as possible to understand if this really is an opportunity. And I think in some cases that's something that people who are used to doing research may be less comfortable with, or just less excited about. Whereas someone with more of a business background, or specifically a sales background, that's going to come a lot more easily to them. So like we said, the first step, or the first section of the 24 steps, is who is your customer, and that's really important. I think we just mentioned that You have to have people who are willing to pay for your product if you want to build a business.
Okay.
So it is really important to understand who your customer is and to use that to have an iterative process to really narrow in on a product that people will buy. So there are a couple of important pieces to this. The first one is market segmentation. So that means breaking down your potential customer types and understanding more about them, what their true needs are, and continuing to ask them and listening. So I think an important aspect here that a lot of people may struggle with is at this stage it's not about pushing your ideas, it's about hearing what their true problems are and then seeing if what you're doing can address them. So that market segmentation is breaking down into various customer types that hopefully have word of mouth between each other. They have similar needs, they have a similar sales cycle, and so you have to think about and brainstorm who are the different types of customers that could be applicable to my idea. And once you've figured out which segments might be applicable, then you have to start talking to them. My rule of thumb, and some people say even more than this, I think at least 10 customers per segment that you're considering. So that's the first thing of just really understanding your customers by talking to a lot of people and then trying to figure out what might be your beachhead. So that the second portion is kind of determining your beachhead market. There's a number of criteria there. I won't get into all of that, but your beachhead is the market that you're going to target first. And that's the customer you've figured out there's a real need, it's big enough, but not too big, and I'll mention that in a second, and it is easy enough to enter that you can really get your business started. So I mentioned you don't want your beachhead market to be too big or too small. If a market is too big, you're going to face tons of competition. You're not really going to be able to make headway the way that you would like if you end up with a huge market. If you are targeting a super small market, then it may not work if it's too niche. You may just never be able to build a decent sized business from it. So where this comes from is thinking about the total addressable market, or your TAM. So your TAM, the recommended size from 24 Steps, the book, is between 20 and 100 million. So that's kind of the thought of not too big, not too small. So the way you look at the total addressable market, you can look at it from two different perspectives. One, which would be where most people would probably tend to go first, is industry reports. So trying to understand from various reports how big the market is, and trying to calculate it from that. The other perspective is actually doing more primary research like we talked about, and kind of getting to know your customers that way and building up how big you think the market is. And in terms of how you calculate that, you're wanting to estimate the revenue that you think you could get in a given year if you captured 100% of the market. So you could think about it as, okay, if I'm going to price my product to be, I would choose how I'm going to price my product per customer. I would charge them $1 per customer, and then I realize there are 100 customers, that would be $100. That would be your total addressable market. Way too small, obviously, but that's kind of how the calculation works.
Right.
And so, kind of getting those steps done is super important. It is not something that you can get done quickly. Unfortunately, it takes a decent amount of time, but it's crucial to making sure that what you're imagining, your idea, your technology, actually has a home in the market. And could potentially be sold. Sure. So about my first job. Yeah. So my first job out of college actually was a company called Harvest Power. So it's a company that focuses on organics recycling. and particularly focuses on anaerobic digestion as a way of processing organic waste. So the central idea there being that still 95% of food waste as part of the municipal solid waste stream, so in the commercial and residential space, 95% of that is still getting thrown away. And there is this negative environmental impact, which is that, of course, we generally don't want to be using landfills more than we want to, but specifically with organic waste, it will decompose in an anaerobic way if it's put in a landfill. And so it produces methane as a byproduct. And as a result of that, you have methane emissions methane being the most potent greenhouse gas, is an important contributor to climate change. So in our case, what we were trying to do was get those organic waste streams out of the trash and into our facilities. In some cases, it was just composting. So that in that case, you're aerobically digesting food waste, so that it actually just converts back and releases CO2 the way that it naturally should in the carbon cycle. And then the other method is anaerobic digestion, where it's in the absence of oxygen. It is anaerobic, but then you capture the methane that would get emitted if it were in a landfill. You capture that gas, and then you use it the same way you use any kind of natural gas. So whether that's converting it to electricity, converting it to compressed natural gas, or even injecting it into the pipeline. So energy efficiency is a big one, and my business is currently related to LED lighting, and certainly there's a lot of progress to be made in energy efficiency. And the interesting thing is that it really makes sense to reduce and kind of make more efficient use of our energy, and combine that with trying to grow renewable energy. It doesn't make sense to just try to make renewable energy match our current load when we still have so much waste in the system. We can still be a lot more efficient. So it's about really doing both of those things. So energy efficiency, there's a lot of retrofitting going on of buildings and things like that. Demand response is another interesting area that that Enernoc, a company here in Boston, originally started addressing, where you're actually trying to essentially reduce peak power. So normally on a given day you have a peak and a trough of how people use their energy. And demand response, for instance, is able to have create a reaction from consumers of energy to reduce at certain times when the grid is in high demand. So you're actually responding to the market, and in that case, it's almost like, and Enernoc calls it sort of like an imaginary power plant, in that by reducing demand, you're able to kind of continue to meet demand without having to turn on additional energy sources that would generate greenhouse gas emissions. So that's kind of one interesting issue that Enernoc specifically addressed, and as a company, they started out specifically focusing on demand response, but have now broadened their scope to include other kinds of energy efficiency, and actually to a lot of software solutions as well. Another interesting one is energy storage. I mean, everybody's talking about it. Obviously, Tesla's making a big show and telling people what they're doing, and certainly being visionary. There are a lot of other great companies actually that are really trying to address that. Right now, energy storage, lithium-ion batteries for energy storage are primarily being used for frequency regulation. So for the tiny fluctuations in demand, you are discharging or charging a battery instead of having to have a higher level of energy that is getting demanded at a given time. So there's definitely lots of interesting things going on in the energy space and lots of opportunities to innovate. Yeah, sure. So kind of our sister company, I would say, in India is an LED lighting company, and that has obvious energy efficiency benefits. And in India, there's a lot of new construction going on, so there's a lot of implementation of LEDs from scratch. When we decided that, the company decided they were interested in the U.S. market, we actually have not, we're not necessarily talking about bringing LED lighting to the U.S. because there's already a lot of activity there, a lot of competitors there. What we have chosen to bring to the U.S. is intelligence. So we have controls for lighting, we're working on controls for HVAC, and also controls back to other systems like booking systems. And so we've chosen to focus on that aspect rather than trying to compete directly with a bunch of other LED lighting companies. So that's a circumstance where we looked into the market in the US, we realized it was crowded to try to plow ahead with the LED lighting products, and we actually chose to focus on kind of intelligence where we think we are able to complement existing companies. So in our case, where we are, we're absolutely following some of the entrepreneurship frameworks that people are familiar with, in that we are in the process of learning the market. And what I am very much in the process of doing is talking to as many people as I can. And it's not just about, in our case, it's not just about talking to potential customer segments. We're absolutely doing that. We're also trying to get information on the market by talking to various members of the value chain. So in our case, there are architects, lighting designers, contractors. These are all people who have information and also will be part of deals going forward. So we have to figure out how we can work with these various players, and what will be the sales process going forward. Okay. So we're in the process of doing this customer exploration. We are also in the process of understanding how sales happen in this kind of market. And then from there, we can figure out who we want to partner with, and then also while still going direct to customers.